Hello, and welcome to week 3 of our Truth series here on the First Pres OC podcast. My name is Gabe Perez. I am the youth pastor here, and I am the man who is behind on podcast episodes, but we are getting through it. And we today are going to be talking about a fun subject that we don't always like to talk about in church or youth group especially. And we're going to focus a lot on sexual sin, but also more specifically pornography and kind of the effects of that, and how we should take a biblical view on that. So we're diving into that today. Obviously, it's a little bit of a heavier subject, so just be advised for that for those listening. If you got some younger kids in the room, if you are listening to this as a family or all together, sometimes it might be not graphic, but might bring up some questions that maybe we don't always want to talk about with some of our younger siblings. So just be mindful of that, and just a heads up. So hope you guys can be informed by it, get blessed by it, and just have a heads up awareness of the dangers of those things. So let's dive into it. We need to jump into this because today we have a very lengthy lesson. So that being said, hey guys, real quick, listen. All right, everybody focus. So obviously, we are in week 3 of our Truth series. We only have one more week of this, and we're going to be hopping to some other stuff. But before we jump into today's lesson, I do want to ask and remind all of you guys to be as mature as possible when we're talking about all these different subjects, because sometimes they're a little bit interesting, sometimes they're a little bit uncomfortable, and sometimes they might be even a little awkward to listen to and hear. So I ask that you guys just be mature about these things. Cool? Cool. This might be, just depends. It might be a little bit for you guys. It's going to be a little awkward for me too. But shh. All right, listen. And also for previous week's lessons for notes and stuff, we are not going to be doing those like before the lesson. We're only going to be doing those after the lesson, and when you guys arrive here. And I actually forgot to do that tonight when you guys arrived, so that's on me because I was running behind today. But from here on out, for notes for the series, we're just going to be talk to me either after the lesson or when you guys first get here, and you guys can get stuff for the lesson, including money for, like, if you get the whole week or the whole series, you get like $5. Again, if you get the previous series, you get another $5, and if you do 3 series in a row, you get a $10 for that 3rd series. But again, that's going to happen either when you arrive here to start the night or at the end of the night before you leave. Cool? All right, so week 1 was all about relationships and marriage, right? So we talked about the truth of God's word when it comes to relationships and marriage. And then week 2, we talked about identity and gender. That's what we talked about last week, which I know, again, so you guys talk about like, oh man, that's a little bit uncomfortable. Because, yeah, it's a kind of a loaded question when someone asks you, hey, what's your identity? Or what do you identify as? Or, hey, describe yourself to me. And so, well, some people might ask you, like, before, whenever their first meeting, and they might say, hey, man. But anyways, that being said, this brings us to week 3 of our Truth series. And tonight we're actually going to be talking about a little bit of some taboo topics. Not some taboo topics per se, but things that people don't like to talk about all the time. More specifically, we're going to be looking at the idea of sex. And we're going to be talking specifically about porn as well. So now, it might seem a little uncomfortable, and yes, Hannah, that is why. You're like, why are we talking about that? And I'm going to tell you guys we're going to be talking about that because it is a very prevalent issue. And also, it's an issue that I can guarantee you most of your families haven't really talked about in depth with you guys, right? Is that a show of hands? Just you don't have to. Who's had a conversation with their family about those topics? Okay, so one person. Well, is it kind of? Yeah, so there's a little, and that's the thing. And if they have talked to you about it, they probably haven't gone super in depth with it, right? It's been pretty mild at best, which we're not going to be like super graphic tonight. And that's again why I want you guys to be mature about this. We're not going to be like vulgar about anything, but we're going to talk about the reality of some of these things, okay? So real quick, does anybody know the story of Jacob and Esau? Anybody know the story of Jacob and Esau? Just on the top of your head. 5, Okay, cool. Nobody. All right, a little bit. All right. So they were brothers. Yes, there you go. So they were actually twin brothers, believe it or not. And so Esau was born first, and Jacob was born second. But literally they're twins. But because Esau came out first, essentially, literally the seconds before, he was the firstborn, and thus he was the firstborn who had rights as the firstborn to inherit things from his family. Right. So fast forward throughout their lives, Esau was a very hairy dude who was like very outdoorsy. He loved the wilderness. He loved to hunt. And his father, so there's like Abraham, Isaac, and then Jacob and Esau. So Isaac was their father. And Isaac really liked, game meat. He liked wild food. And so he loved Esau a lot. He's like, bro, Esau, you're my son, dude. And Jacob was like, he was kind of talked about him being fair-skinned and him being kind of hairless and kind of liked housework more. And so he wasn't as more of a manly man. He was kind of like, I like to take care of the house. I like to do that. He's not necessarily like this burly, hairy dude. So Esau, they were kind of opposites. And so obviously they weren't like identical twins. They were fraternal twins. But that being said, there was a prophecy about how they were going to be, there's two nations essentially that they were going to represent and eventually grow into being. And we see that today, and we'll get to a whole other story. But that being said, fast forward to this time later on, and their father, Isaac, is super rich because Abraham, his father, was super rich. So Abraham got a lot of stuff, super rich dude, lots of animals, lots of gold, lots of silver. Isaac inherits that. Lots of animals, lots of silver, and to the point where literally he gets so wealthy and has so many things that the local rulers and local towns were like, dude, you need to get away from us. Like you're too close. Like you have too much power. You have too many things. You need to leave. And so literally people were pushing him away, finally till they get to a place where they're settled down, right? And so that's this massive inheritance that is basically set up for Esau. All right, and if you're asking how to spell Esau, I wasn't sure if is that what you're asking? E-S-A-U. It's E-S-A-U. I'm sure you can see that from the screen, right? There you go. But that being said, that's kind of where we get this place, right? So that's the inheritance that Esau is waiting for him. But at a certain point, Esau actually forgot how valuable that inheritance that he had waiting for him was. There was something waiting for him in the future, but he kind of took for granted how valuable it was. So look here, Genesis 25. It says, the boys grew up. Esau became a skillful hunter. He liked the open country, but Jacob was content to stay at home among his tents. Isaac liked the meat of wild animals. So Esau was his favorite son. But Rebekah's favorite was Jacob. One day Jacob was cooking some stew. Esau came in from the open country. He was very hungry. He said to Jacob, quick, I'm very hungry. I need to have some of that red stew, bro. I need that red stew right now. That's why he was also named Edom. Jacob replied, first, show me the rights that belong to you as the oldest of the family. Look, I'm dying of hunger, Esau said. What good are those rights to me? But Jacob said, first, promise to sell me your rights. So Esau promised to do it. So he sold Jacob all the rights that belonged to him as the oldest son. Then Jacob gave Esau some bread and some lentil stew. By the way, lentils is like beans. Yeah. He gave him some little bean stew and some bread. All right. Esau ate and drank. He then got up and left. So Esau didn't value the rights that belonged to him as the oldest son. Now, Esau didn't value the rights that belonged to him. He didn't value what was his. He didn't appreciate what belonged to him, and he didn't appreciate what was awaiting him later on. He took for granted what was on the future. He wasted it away. And I'm telling you guys right now, it's not like Esau was in a foreign nation and that was like the one like safe place he was at. He was at home. He could have got some bread and waited like 10 minutes, man. But he saw that stew. It was right in front of his face. And he's like, bro, that's what I want. I see something and I want it. He's like, oh, I need some of that good. I need that red stew, bro. I need that red stew. Because guess what? That red stew, that hits different, bro. It hits different. And I'll tell you what. Esau's kind of stupid. But I'll tell you what. I'll tell you what also. It does hit different. But I'll tell you what. I really, really do not like Jacob. I like when you read about Jacob. When you read about Jacob in the Bible, he is such a freaking weasel, dude. He is like so no, but his name literally means like ones who tricks or ones who deceives. That's literally his name. And Esau's name was literally like because he was red skinned and hairy, so they named him Esau, which is talking about like basically the tone of his skin was what they named him off of. And then Jacob, whenever he came out of the womb, he was grabbing his brother's ankle when they came out of the womb, and so they named. So basically, that's a sign in Jewish culture of someone who's kind of a trickster, someone who's getting the best of somebody. And so that's exactly what Jacob did. He over and over again, you see him trick people, his brother more specifically, and ended up taking the birthright from his brother over, taking advantage of his brother being tired. But also Esau did not value what he had.
The thing is, whose stew is that to sell? His mom probably
Okay. All right. Stop. All right. So oftentimes when it comes to this world, guys, we are surrounded by images and messages that are telling us, dude, just do this. Just go after that. Hey, do what you want to do. Or it's not that big of a deal. Or even, hey, sometimes the world will tell you, hey, that person, those people in your life, they don't want what's best for you. Instead, you need to follow your heart. Seek after what you want. Don't follow what other people say. Do what you want. You do you. Remember we talked about that last week. You do you. And this is especially true when it comes to relationships and more specifically, sex and sexual things. All right? So now there's a saying that's called sex sells. You guys ever heard that? And just raise your hand if you ever heard that before. Man has definitely heard that. So you probably heard it kind of just thrown around, but the reason people say that is because that's how they end up getting people interested in a lot of things. They put these images that are either sexual or suggestive in a lot of advertisements, whether it's in video games, whether it's ads on TV, whether it's TV shows, whether it's video poetry even writes about these things, whether it's like social media. Like anything you're looking at in this world, there's going to be, you're exposed to these suggestive and or outright sexual images, right? And you're encouraged to look at these things everywhere. And not only that, I'm sure you guys hear or see things at school from other people. You hear things from other people at school like, oh, they hooked up, or oh, they slept together over the weekend, or oh, I wonder. Okay, some of you guys might not. Some of you guys are a little bit younger. Sometimes you guys are in high school. But listen, so just pay attention. Or sometimes you might even say, oh, like they've lost their V card. Oh my gosh. Or you hear your friends make suggestive jokes. Hey, come on, guys, come on. Might make suggestive jokes about each other or other people in ways, or even look at somebody suggestively. And you guys are talking about it with your friends about a guy or a girl, right? Now, from my perspective, it feels like whenever I'm looking at the world, it feels like that stuff is everywhere. Would you guys say that's true just by raising hands? Yeah? Yeah. And so, again, during this series, remember, I want you guys to, feel like, don't just outright interrupt. But if you guys have something to, maybe a question or something like that, feel free to raise your hand. And I don't want it to be just like a one-way thing. This is like, hey, if you have something to say or ask about, that's okay. So all of these cultural influences are telling everybody that sex is good. Look at others in this way. Do it. It's good. It's okay. We're asked to and encouraged to celebrate sexuality. And that's what we talked about, your gender and your, hey, how do you identify? Or, hey, what is your sexuality? Are you straight? Are you asexual? Are you trans? Talking about these, different trends that are going around are all based around your sex and sexual activity. But the thing is, that's not really a good way to look at the world. And guess what? That kind of mentality, when everyone's telling you, hey, how do you identify? Hey, what's your sexuality? How do you, hey, what's your preferences? What do you like? All these different things when it comes to, all these weird, flirty, suggestive things. Maybe even with your boyfriend or girlfriend, you think, oh, it's not that big of a deal. But when you're surrounded by all these things that are influencing the way you're thinking, it affects you in ways you don't realize. Now, and especially all that to say, so all these suggestive images lead a lot of people into pornography. Now, we're going to talk about this, and again, I just want you guys to be mature about it, all right? So, essentially, these graphic images of intimate acts, all right? are everywhere. And guess what? They are literally all over the internet. A majority of internet traffic is for pornography. And 40% of our waking hours as people in today's world is spent on the internet. So if 40% of your daily time is just on the internet and 60% is spent on everything else, you're more than likely going to be exposed to some kind of graphic content, even to mild or extreme stuff, either by choice or accidentally. And I'm just going to give you guys some cold hard statistics, and we're going to kind of go through this together, okay? So, believe it or not, 92% of guys and 60% of women from the age of 18 to 73 watch porn. And it's become normal for people to do in today's society. In today's world, especially in the Western world, it is normal and it's not odd for people to do that. No one talks about it because it's kind of a weird thing to just talk about casually, but it is prevalent in everywhere. And it's not something that we need to just pretend is we shouldn't just brush it under the rug because it's uncomfortable. We as Christians need to talk about this. And that's also, those statistics are not including people under the age of 18, which is most internet graphic things, especially young men, are exposed to at a very early age, around 9, 10, or 11. And it's not something that is uncommon. I myself, whenever I was young, I was exposed to things on just late night TV that they used to broadcast. And at my friend's house is where I would watch that stuff with them. And that's when I was first exposed to that stuff. Internet was not a thing whenever I was a kid. But guess what? I went over to my friend's house and it was over there. And it wasn't because I sought it out. It was just there. And it was the first time I was ever exposed to it. It was at a friend's house whenever I didn't have a choice. Now, as a kid, I didn't really understand what was going on or why. But that set up a habit for me in my life. And I was young. I was very young, guys. I was like 10 or 11. And it's a problem. And we'll get into that later on. But now, this can be weird and uncomfortable to talk about, but it's important that because it's not talked about in our homes very much, right? And at your schools, I'm sure people aren't pulling you aside and being like, hey, we need to talk about this really uncomfortable issue. But it is an issue that is very important, and we're going to get into why, because of how it affects us, guys. So we're just going to jump into these statistics with it, okay? We're just going to look at it from a worldly point of view, the basic. This isn't like hey, I'm a Christian, giving you a really Christian thing based on the effects of porn because porn's bad from a Christian view. I'm going to take the Christianity out of this and just give you cold hard statistics of how porn actually affects you from a worldly point of view, and then we're going to go to the godly point of view and see how both sides either line up or they differ, okay? That's kind of the whole point of this whole truth thing. All right, so let's jump into it. So the effects of early sexual behavior. These are just, you had it? Yeah. So early sexual behavior leads to greater sexually transmitted infections, so STIs. It leads to greater amounts of babies born outside of marriage or relationships, what we call babies born in wedlock. So essentially, let's say you are sleeping with somebody, you're not in a relationship with them, and all of a sudden that person is pregnant, and they have a baby, but they're not in a relationship with that person. More single parents, decreased marital stability long-term, more child poverty, increased rate of babies killed through abortions, higher depression rates in society, and decreased happiness levels. Now, all of this is based off of a study done through the Heritage Foundation, and specifically about harmful effects of early sexual activity in multiple partners among women, more specifically, but also they covered the effects on men as well. And so I'm kind of summarizing some of the multiple studies, okay? So while the world is telling you guys, and a lot of times you might hear this later on, you might hear this now, you might not have ever heard this, but there might be people in some way or another telling you guys to explore your sexuality, explore what you might like. And even it might even say, hey, it's okay to sleep with multiple people or have multiple relationships to find out what you like. They might say, hey, that's okay. But as long as you practice safe sex, you're okay. A lot of people will encourage that. Now, you guys might be shocked, and I realize it. I know it's kind of uncomfortable. We're going to get through it, all right? But what a lot of people aren't telling you is what the effects of like early sexual activity leads to. All right. Now, what about specifically porn use? Okay, so let's get into more relevant things for us today. But let's get into that. All right. Bam. So negative effects of porn use. So it negatively impacts relationships. So this one, it's the second strongest indicator that relationships suffered, and it had double the reported breakups whenever there was porn use in a relationship. And that's including not only it's including outside factors as well. So even when there's other factors included, porn use was still the second highest indicator of breakups and divorces. All right. It is habitual and addictive. It's not technically a traditional addiction, as in like, oh man, I need that substance, I need that thing. But because porn use and the internet in general is fairly young, the internet's only been around for about 30 years in the way we know it, and internet in your hand 24/7, any time of the day you want, has only been around for maybe 15 years. So basically just before you guys were born or around the time you guys were born. And even then, 15 years ago, it was like wild, like, whoa, you have the internet in your hand, that's crazy. Like, yeah, I can check my emails. Like, that's really what it was. But nowadays you have like HD streaming in your hand 24/7 almost anywhere in the world, which is a crazy phenomenon, which means all those things on the internet are available at your hands anytime you want it. That's how dangerous it is. And it's extremely addictive, but it's not necessarily a traditional addiction. All right. Porn distorts normal sexual behavior and turns normal things into fetishes, and even end up becoming people profit off those things. All right. Statistically, porn perpetuates racism, sexism, and sexual violence in society. It negatively affects your sexual function. Now, talking about that, like, let's say you guys want to have a marriage one day, and let's say you're used to watching pornography on your own. And when you get into a marriage and you're trying to be intimate with your partner, because you've been watching things for so long, it kind of distorts and affects your body and your ability to be able to be intimate with your partner. So normally, your normal interaction with having a spouse and being able to have intimacy with them in the bedroom, if you keep watching that stuff, it starts messing with you being able to do that. Like, you literally can't have normal sex with your partner. And there's a big correlation, like long term. So let's say like you guys have been watching it for your whole life, and all of a sudden, and statistically it'll show guys that, like, especially specifically focused on guys, we'll talk about the percentage of women later, but specifically guys, they will get married in their like an early to mid 20s, and then they start having erectile dysfunction. So essentially their junk stops working, all right? And it's because they continued watching porn even though they were married, and now they can't even have intimacy with their wife. And so they stop watching it to try and get themselves to be able to function normally again. That's what it talks about negatively affects your normal sexual function, all right? So it also creates fake expectations and false ideas of what sex needs to be, all right? Because when you look at porn and it says that, like, oh, this is what sex really is, and a lot of people will go to porn to try and learn about sex, but it's giving very false information. It's giving a false idea, and it's making you think that that's how things should be. When in reality, pornography and the porn industry is selling a lot of lies. It's selling false realities, and it's making you think things are normal when they are not normal and they're not okay. And it leads to really, really unhealthy mental and physical and emotional habits that you form within yourself. All right? And now, porn literally changes the brain chemistry through neuroplasticity. So this is a quote from a study, all right? So you guys see it, you don't have to copy it down. So this is a quote from a secular, non-profit website devoted to talking about the truth of porn use, all right? So when we engage in an activity, particularly a pleasurable activity, and particularly if it involves repetition and intense focus, Our brains alter themselves so that they'll be better and more efficient at doing that activity the next time. But this brain process can also be overwhelmed by what's referred to as subnormal stimulus, an exaggerated form of what's normal. Pornography, for example, can take our brain's normal stimuli, our desire for intimacy and connection, and gives us more quantity, more exaggerated, and more super normal versions of that desire. The neuroplastic process, porn can change what we perceive as normal, warp what we find exciting, and make real intimacy, like real life stuff, less interesting by comparison. So that's just a secular understanding. And by the way, those little numbers you see by these things, like a 35 and stuff, those are studies that are referenced in this post when we're talking about this, all right? So now, porn normalizes abuse. So according to a study that analyzed porn titles alone, 1 out of every 8 titles suggested to first-time users on porn sites described acts of sexual violence. Research also suggests that as few as 1 in 3 and as many as 9 in 10 porn scenes contain physical violence or aggression. It fuels mental health issues, and porn fuels sex trafficking and child pornography, all right? And then lastly, before we get into that, there's another thing. Sorry, and I know it's a lot, guys. I realize this is like kind of crazy. So porn users, especially men, tend to be more likely to objectify and dehumanize others, more likely to express the intent to rape, less likely to intervene during a sexual assault, more likely to victim blame sexual assault survivors, more likely to support violence against women, and more likely to commit actual acts of sexual violence. Now, all of that sounds crazy and very intense. And I know all of this might be like, oh my gosh, Gabe, this is a little bit too much. This is a little bit intense. But I just want you guys to understand the truth behind pornography and the truth behind like sex early on in life, okay? This is a little bit uncomfortable, sounds kind of crazy, but this is the reality that we have to address. And we have to understand this. And again, all these things I'm looking at here and I've shared with you are not from a Christian website or a Christian worldview. This is unbiased, unfiltered, straight data about the effects of this stuff. Okay? Now lastly, this is going to be a longer one, but I want you guys to go. So this is a National Institute of Health study titled Sociological, Psychological, and Substance Abuse Effects of Pornography Addiction, a narrative review. It says, internet pornography provides explicit content in various forms and can progress to from habit to addiction. The consumption of online porn has risen due to the general use of current technology. The main reasons people consume it are sexual arousal and sexual enhancement. We planned this review study to identify the reasons for online pornography utilization, the mechanisms involved in its addiction, and its sociological, emotional, behavioral, social, and substance abuse effects. After a detailed literature search through PubMed Central and Google Scholar, 4 case studies and 9 original articles from 2022 were included. The main findings of the literature demonstrated that watching porn was most frequently done out of boredom, from sexual gratification, and to pick up new fashion or behavior ideas from these movies. In all facets of users' lives, negative consequences were seen. Due to the explosion of new technologies, online pornography has risen to an alarming level, which has very injurious effects on societies and individuals. Therefore, it is high time to get rid of this addiction to protect our lives from its harmful effects. Now, I don't know about you guys, but that sounds pretty serious. It's a very, very big deal. And I'm bringing all this up because we need to recognize and understand the seriousness of this thing that we were exposed to. And sometimes it's very subtle. Sometimes it's on social media and you see some person working out and they're wearing barely any clothes. And you're like, oh, they're just working out. It's fine. To a point, yes. But how often are you watching, like, let's say, guys, you're watching that girl work out, or you're looking at those female athletes doing things, or maybe you're like, oh, like she's kind of cute. I'm gonna watch her do this, and vice versa. Even for women, you're like, oh man, like that guy's pretty cute, and you start daydreaming and having these wandering thoughts. And it all started just from a basic social media post. It doesn't take much because our brains are normally hardwired to be attracted to those things. And what we look at matters. And even in the Bible, Jesus puts it this way in Matthew 6. He says, the eye is the lamp of the body.
Yeah.
If your eyes are healthy, your whole body will be full of light. If your eyes are unhealthy, your whole body will be full of darkness. If then the light within you is darkness, how great is that darkness? So what Jesus is talking about, he's referencing the love of like possessions and things that you're focusing on, because he says where your heart will be, there your treasure will be also. He says that in the verse just before this. But he's trying to emphasize to the people, and we need to understand and learn what he's talking about, is what you're looking at, what you're focusing on, is really what you're desiring in your heart. What you're most consumed by and what you're thinking about the most, what you're like watching, things that you're, even putting your mental and emotional energy into, is really where your heart is. So let's say you have a relationship and all you can think about is your boyfriend or your girlfriend. You're like, oh man, I wonder what she's doing. Oh, I wonder what he's doing. Oh, and you're like texting each other all the time. Or maybe you're like, I'm really into the video game, and you're like always thinking about that video game. You're always thinking about how can I get this, like, oh man, and I'll tell you guys, I've been playing The Witcher 3 lately. I've been grinding on The Witcher 3, and I literally, like, I went to bed the other day dreaming about it. It was crazy. So now I'm like, but I'm like, dude, I need to stop playing it because I know if I'm dreaming about it, I'm doing it too much, all right? That's telling me where my heart's at, right? But that's an example of even me just playing a video game that I love that's harmless. It's not going to hurt anybody. It's me just passing time. But guess what? It's infecting my brain to the point where I'm thinking about it when I'm away from it. And it's the same exact thing when we're looking at stuff online. What's up, Matt?
Gabe, I spent like an hour playing Blade Ball.
There you go.
Only an hour?
Okay, okay.
When I closed my eyes, I literally saw the red ball coming
Yeah.
towards me.
Okay, that's a distraction. I get it. A little bit of focus. I appreciate that. All right. But the thing is, again, so, hey guys, listen. So that idea of, hey, what you're focusing on is where your heart's at, and it affects your mind, and it affects your heart, your soul. It affects who you are. You start seeking after those things. And guess what? Yeah, Matt, you're like, oh, it was only an hour? Like, I grinded on The Witcher 3 the other day for like 4 hours till 3 in the morning. I was telling you guys on Sunday. I was so tired. But guess what? Like, it affects you. Even if it's 1 hour, 30 minutes, or 10 hours. I don't need a comment for that. It's okay. I understand. Point being is what you're focusing on, it changes who you are. And especially when it comes to explicit images online, whether it's overtly sexual, like just straight pornography, or whether it's suggestive content, like maybe someone doing suggestive things online. And I'll tell you what, perfect example, Hannah. So sorry, I'm not calling you out, but last week, a few weeks ago, when the guys were playing Super Smash Bros. Pyra and Mithra. You guys all know exactly what I'm talking about. Oh. So Hannah looks at the screen, she sees Pyra and Mithra, and no. But listen. So Pyra and Mithra are one of the characters is a little bit more well endowed. All right, she's got a bigger chest. Okay, but guys, listen. You might think it's funny, but Hannah looked at that and she said, "What is that character?" And instead it was Pyra and Mithra, and she goes, "Why is she built like that?"
Whoa.
Because guess what? Hannah, as a woman, recognized, hey, why is her chest so big? What the heck? What game are they playing? Because she saw it and recognized, hey, that's kind of weird. And that is Super Smash Bros, guys. No. That's a kid's game. But that's how prevalent this stuff is. And you guys are like, oh, what are you talking about? It's Pyra and Mithra. Who cares? But whenever you guys are doing things, you don't realize how it is everywhere. Even in Super Smash Bros, guys. Now, I'm not going to take Super Smash Bros away and say, oh my gosh, it's sexually explicit, it's totally. But what I'm saying is like we have to be aware of the fact that this stuff is everywhere. And what we're looking at matters. And Christ himself. So it talks about like all these studies are saying, hey, when you watch this, it changes who you are. And then Jesus says, hey, where your eyes are at, that's where your heart is. they sound pretty similar to me, right? It sounds like Jesus actually knows the heck what he's talking about, right? And it actually tells me that when the Bible says we shouldn't be looking at these things because it changes who we are, it lines up exactly with what the world says. Oh, we're studying this thing that we've been doing. Oh, it's kind of crazy. This thing is having really bad effects. And Jesus is like, yeah, because you guys are looking at really bad stuff. You shouldn't be doing that. And how often for us do we, as believers or just in general in our lives, how often, like Esau, do we give away our innocence, our future family stability? We give away our mental and emotional health. We trade that out for some explicit images or for some temporary gratification in the moment, right? Esau had a massive inheritance waiting for him. He just had to wait. He just had to wait, and it was going to be his eventually. But he saw an immediate thing in front of him. He said, heck, I really like that. But guess what? I'm going to give up all of this for this thing right here. And guess what? For us, whenever we start giving into sexual desires, whether it be with another person or through pornography, whenever we're looking at those things or giving into those desires that we have, we're trading away a better marriage. We're trading away partners' trust. We're trading away family stability. We're trading away our mental health. We're trading away a healthy emotional heart that is sensitive to our partner. And also, not only that, we're trading away the fun and joy of exploring like healthy sex with our partner. We're trading that away for in the moment stuff. We're giving all that away for something that's so temporary and in the moment. And oftentimes, sometimes it's, you hear about it at school and you're like, bro, what the heck? But how often, we hear those things, or like, as you guys get older, people are going to talk more about it. People are going to pretend like it's, something that everyone's doing, or you're going to feel kind of left out. You're going to feel like, oh my gosh, why is everybody doing that? Or, hey, how is it that everybody's having sex and I'm not? Or some people are like, oh my gosh, everybody watches porn. What the heck's going on? And you start getting tempted by it. You start thinking, oh, maybe I should do that. You think it's normal to do those things. And I'll tell you what, guys, when I was in high school, so I was exposed to porn a lot earlier in life, so around 10 or 11. But it wasn't until I was in high school that I started to hear other people talk about having sex on a regular basis. Matt, I'm sorry. I'm just gonna sorry. It was until I was in high school until I heard people talking about like sex on a regular basis, like friends that I had. And there was a guy in class who was dating a senior, and this senior and him were having regular sex. And I remember he was talking about it like as it was so cool, and all the other guys in the class, they were all in our row in our math class talking about it. It was like it was my freshman year in my math class. We're talking about it in the back of the room, and I remember I was like, "Oh, what are you guys talking about?" And he looks at me and he says, "Hey, Gabe, don't worry. You don't need to worry about it. We don't need any more virgin ears. We don't need any virgin ears listening on this." And I felt like this, like, what? Like, are you kidding me? Like. But what it was telling me, and what I ended up like feeling, was I felt like left out all of a sudden, because I was like, what do you mean? Virgin ears is so everybody else here isn't a virgin all of a sudden? And the thing is, it gave me a false sense that almost everybody around me just was having sex all the time. But it's not true, guys. Everyone likes to pretend like it's a normal thing, that everyone's doing it, or it happens all the time. And eventually, as you get later on, a lot of people do end up like losing their virginity when they're in high school. It's a very common thing, and it's not a good thing. Just because it's normal doesn't mean it's good. And for me, it ended up making me feel like I was kind of out of place. And eventually, the next year, I ended up losing my virginity with my girlfriend. It's a big part of my testimony, and I'll tell you guys about that. I've told you it before, but I'll tell you later on again. But it affected me later on in a big way, because I let my perspective go from hearing the people around me rather than thinking about what God's perspective on things was. So now we've addressed all the negatives of all this, okay? I want to explore the other side of the issue and kind of what all that means, all right? So there's a negative side. There's also the good side, the things that I want to talk about. So At this point, I also want to point out that the reason that we strive after these things, the reason that we're like have these desires, the reason that people are wanting these things, for one, it's escapism, but part of it is also because God made us to express. He made us expressive. God made us expressive. So what do I mean by that? God made us so he created us, right? But God created us as an expression of his love and his glory, right? God in his goodness was like, I want to create something else. So out of the expression of God's love and glory and desire for good, he made a good, beautiful, glory creation. He made us. He made the world, this universe. He made it out of his own love, his own creative desire, his own expression of himself. That's why we have an image of God in us, right? We have the desire for him. We have a desire for good. We want to have that, but we just have to remember we have that God-shaped hole that sin causes us in our lives. So we all have a desire to express how we feel, right? God expressed his love for us, not only dying for us on the cross, but originally by creating us. And we too, being image bearers, we also have an image of God in us. We have divine nature where we want to express ourselves. We want to create things, right? Some of it's like through sports. We can express ourselves through sports. Or sometimes it's through robotics or computers. Sometimes it's through music. Sometimes it's through freaking, poetry.
Art.
Yeah, exactly. Art, poetry, name something else another way people express themselves. Music's a big way, right? But guess what? It's reflective of what you want, right? It's an expression of a deep feeling that you have in different ways. And for us, that also includes our physical desires too. How do we express our physical desires? Well, part of that is through sex, guys. Sex is not bad. It's not a bad thing. It's not this taboo, we can never have sex. I'm not saying that. But what I am saying, what the Bible tells us, is that sex should be something that's reserved for a marriage. And it's also something that is beautiful when it's in that. It's something that is so wonderful that you get to have an experience with your partner. But the thing is, that's the inheritance that Esau gave away. And if we are Esau, we don't want to just give up that beautiful, wonderful inheritance that's waiting for us by giving into our temporary desires that we have now. We should understand that we have something so much better waiting for us later on, guys. God doesn't say sex is bad, and if you ever hear anybody say that sex is bad, that's a lie. All right? But the thing is, when you look at the truth of God's word and we look at the truth of the statistics about all this stuff, we have to realize and remember that it's a good thing, but we can easily get obsessed by it, just like anything else. But we have to also realize that while intimacy, as we talk about it, intimacy that God designed for a marriage, intimacy is good, but it also can wait. There you go. There you go. Intimacy is good, but it can wait. And you don't need to rush to sleep with anybody. And if someone you're dating is pressuring you to do that at some point, if you guys are ever dating somebody and they kind of express hey, what if we were doing a little something? And you're like, hey, how about you get the heck away from me? Right. Because as much as it might feel tempting to do that, and I'll tell you guys, it's easy to lie to yourself. So when I was in high school, my girlfriend, the one who I lost my virginity with, we always said, hey, we're going to get married anyway. We always said we're going to get married anyway. And guess what? We never got married. And guess what? We slept together even though we said we would never do that. But guess what? We did. And then our relationship just got worse and worse and worse from there. It's not something that just helps make everything better. It doesn't. And it's something that you can wait for. I'm telling you guys, you can wait for it. Believe me. Yes, it's a strong desire. Believe me, it's a strong desire. I struggled with that most of my life, guys. I'm telling you guys right now. And it's, even as a married man, someone who loves my wife dearly, who finds her very attractive, and also has a kid that I love more than anything with my wife, I still have to keep myself in check. And my desires, my temptations, my things that I struggle with. And guess what? Yeah, I'm a youth pastor. That doesn't make me any less human. Doesn't make me any less capable of sin. I'm in the same boat as each and every one of you guys, having to fight my own sinful desires. Whether that be someone struggling to not steal, or someone not, struggling not to gossip, or someone struggling not to give into sexual sin. And for us, we have to realize that whenever we're trading away, we're trading that, that given temptation in the moment. We're taking that plus the shame, plus the guilt, plus the uncertainty of our future. And we're giving away our love and joy and everything that we have when it comes to a beautiful, healthy relationship. Now, for us, I want you guys to think about this. We also need to remember that in this, we have to try and find accountability, right? So the best way to get through this and to try and battle these things is to find accountability. What do I mean by that? That means going to somebody and saying, hey, I struggle with this. I need some help. And I want you to hold me accountable. That means admitting to somebody, hey, I need some help with this. And that person being the person that can go to you and say, hey, Richard, how you doing today? And you being able to tell them, you know what, today I'm really struggling. I'm super tempted right now. Or, hey, I looked at something this morning, or I looked at something last night, and that's really, I messed up. And I can be like, you know what, Richard, you shouldn't have done that, man. What's going on, dude? Where's your heart at? And it's not me. That person isn't being demeaning or like looking down on you for that. It's someone holding you accountable to the standard that God has for us. Which means the accountability that we're finding needs to be in a believer as well. You need to go to somebody, be honest with them, and that person needs to be a believer, and that person is going to hold you to God's standard. That's what accountability is, all right? Now, if any of you guys are struggling with either looking at porn or even having any kind of thoughts with your relationships or just struggling to look at things and you know that you're caught in that stuff, I do not want any of you guys to feel ashamed or feel like you can't tell anybody. I want each and every one of you guys to know you can tell me, you can tell Amanda, but I want you guys, if you are struggling with that, do not leave here without telling somebody. Because when you find accountability, you're not handling it on your own. And I'll tell you what, how many times are you fighting sin on your own and you lose? Every time. Because it's easy to let yourself slide. But whenever someone else who loves you is holding you accountable, it helps you to be better. It helps you to have someone else helping you through that struggle. And especially when it comes to this porn or sexual sin, you need accountability. Someone else to look to help you, okay? And I beg you guys, let's help each other. Let me help you. Let Amanda help you. Whoever. But don't leave here if you're struggling with that. And you can come up to me on your own, or you can come to somebody else on your own. We don't have to make a big scene about it. It doesn't have to be this big, like, oh my gosh, I need help, da da da. If you don't want to tell everybody, that's okay. But tell somebody. Let somebody know. I'm happy to do that for each and every one of you guys. I'm willing and able to do that because I love and care about you guys enough for whoever comes to me. Okay? Understand that? The Bible talks about in Hebrews 10. It said, let us consider how we may spur one another on toward love and good deeds. Real quick, does anybody know what a spur is?
Cow thing. It's like whatever.
It's the thing you put on your heel. A spur.
Oh,
Like,
it's
yeah, a spur. It's like a spike or a little thing on your heel. So whenever you're riding a horse, you kick your heels in. And that spur pokes him in its side. But guess what? That poke in its side tells a horse, run faster. Hey, get on it. It's not a pleasant thing. It's not something that's super enjoyable. But guess what? It helps move things forward. And for us as believers, we need to spur each other. We need to be like, hey, Richard, come on, bro. Come on, bro. Yeah, his arm's dead now, right? Hit him twice. But it's a loving push. It's like saying, hey, come on. Matthew, come on. I know you can, man. Hey, let's move past the sin, bro. Let's get past this. God's got bigger and better things for you, man. It's spurring each other on. It's encouraging one another, okay? Let's spur one another on toward love and good deeds, not giving up meeting together, some in their habit of doing, but encouraging one another. And all the more as you see the day approaching. Let's encourage each other in our faith, guys. If we're struggling with some kind of sexual sin or pornography, let's not try and do it on our own. That's a mistake, guys. And you're gonna fall short. I've been there. I've done that to way too many times, guys. And I don't want you guys to have to struggle and go through what I've done. Go find somebody that can help. And I'm telling you right now, I'm willing and able to do that for you right now. You just have to be able to say, hey, I need some help. All right? And I want to encourage you. And we should encourage each other. If any of you guys, whether you're siblings or whoever, encourage each other. Say, hey, man, come on. Why are you looking at that stuff? Hey, are you caught up in that? Hey, why are you joking around about that stuff, man? Don't talk about her like that. Or, hey, don't talk about him like that. Come on. That's not okay, man. Come on. That's holding each other accountable. That's helping each other to be better. Not because we just want to be better, but because God calls us to be better. As Christians, that's what we're called to. We're called to be like Christ. So don't trade your purity, your mental health, your future family, or the beauty of sexual exploration with your spouse. Don't trade all that so you can just fit in or find what you like. That just leads to more sadness and more hurt. And it's worth waiting on the things that God has intended for you. And until then, find someone to keep you from slipping, all right? Let's pray. Father God, we thank you so much. Lord, we know that this topic can be uncomfortable and it can be kind of weird. But Lord, it's important to understand the dangers that we face in the world around us and the things that we're tempted with and the things that we're shown and exposed to. Lord, sometimes it's subtle, like in Super Smash Bros. Other times it's very obvious and in our face. Sometimes we seek it out ourselves, God. But Lord, I pray that you would convict us of that if we know that we've been hiding that and showing, and not showing that to anybody, Lord. Let us feel that conviction and that desire to give that thing up and not continue on in that anymore, Lord. Let us not live two lives of saying, oh, I'm good, everything's great, and then go home and, we're looking at stuff we shouldn't be. God, help us to be able to be humble and have somebody else help us. And Lord, ultimately, we pray for your hand in our life to protect us from ourselves and from the world. We don't want to get caught up in sin that drags us farther away from you. We don't want to trade away the beautiful inheritance that's set before us, God. We don't want to be like Esau. We want to value what we have. So God, help us to value it. Help us to understand the beauty of what's ahead of us. Lord, give us patience, give us understanding, and help us to have somebody to hold us accountable, whoever there might be, to spur us and that other person on to better things for you, Jesus. In your mighty name we pray. Amen.
And there you have it, guys. That is week 3 of our Truth series. Obviously trying to crank these out as fast as I can, but life's busy, so I appreciate the patience for everybody. But we are working towards getting caught up. So hope you guys have a good day, a good weekend, good evening, wherever you're at, whenever you're listening to this. Just stay blessed. And remember, the Lord loves you, and you can always lean on Him for strength.